Intro: The Day of Reckoning. Suffolk County Courthouse, Courtroom 7. November 15, 2024. I sat in the witness stand. Before me sat 3 defendants. The children I had raised for 40 years. My eldest son Robert, my daughter Elizabeth, and my youngest son Michael. The judge spoke.
Mrs. Sullivan, do you have anything you wish to say to the defendants?
I slowly raised my head. Robert hung his head low. Elizabeth was sobbing. Only Michael still looked at me with those cold eyes. I leaned toward the microphone. Your Honor, my voice echoed through the courtroom. I'm not here today to condemn my children. Murmurs rippled through the room. I'm here today to reflect on my own failures as a mother. At that moment, Michael let out a scornful laugh.
Here we go again, the poor suffering mother act.
Defendant, you will remain silent.
The judge warned, but Michael didn't stop.
Your Honor, that woman isn't even my real mother. I was switched at birth 40 years ago. So she has no right to expect anything from me.
The courtroom erupted. I looked at Michael, the child I had nursed for 40 years. The child I had given everything to. Even though he hadn't come from my body. I had never once thought of him as someone else's son. Michael, my voice didn't waver. Even though you didn't come from me. I raised you as my son for 40 years.
So what? Is that supposed to mean something?
Blood or not, you are my son.
That's rich. Then why did you press charges? Shouldn't a mother protect her son?
I slowly stood up. I didn't press charges to punish you. I did it to save you.
What?
If you keep going down this path, you'll never become a decent human being. That's why I had to stop you. It was the last thing I could do as your mother. For the first time, Michael's expression wavered. I continued, Your Honor, let me tell you how I came to be standing here today. From the very beginning, this is the story of a 78-year-old mother who pretended to have dementia. While watching her children's true colors, and finally brought them to judgment. And what I discovered along the way wasn't just my children's betrayal. Secrets hidden for 40 years. The truth about my husband's disappearance. And which child was truly mine. It took exactly 1 year for everything to come to light. The birthday that changed everything. I turned 78 this year. People say that as you approach 80, some great wisdom comes to you. That you become enlightened about life, detached from worldly concerns. I thought I would be like that too. After living 78 years. Surely nothing in this world could shake me anymore. But I was wrong. The greatest betrayals in life come from those you trust the most. And I received that betrayal on my birthday, from my own children. March 15th, my birthday. My daughter Elizabeth had reserved a private room at an upscale restaurant in Boston. She said all 3 children would be there together for the first time in years. The grandchildren too. I couldn't hide my excitement for days beforehand. I took out my nicest navy blue dress from the closet, had it pressed. Got my hair done at the salon. How foolish I was. How terribly foolish. When I arrived at the restaurant, all 3 were already there. My eldest son Robert sat in a corner with his wife Jennifer, drinking heavily. His expression was troubled. Ever since his business went bankrupt 2 years ago. Robert always looked like that. Like a man being chased. Anxious, restless, on edge. Elizabeth greeted me at the entrance. Smiling brightly, she took my arm and led me inside. Elizabeth was always like that. The perfect daughter in everyone's eyes. accompanying me to doctor's appointments, managing my medications, sending thoughtful gifts every holiday. The neighbors always said how lucky I was to have such a devoted daughter. Michael arrived 30 minutes late. I knew he was busy as a tech company CEO. But being 30 minutes late to your own mother's birthday dinner seemed wrong. But I said nothing. Michael was the most successful of the three, living in a penthouse on the Upper East Side. Who was I to say anything? How blind I was. The food arrived. Wine flowed. Things turned strange when Robert suddenly put down his fork. Robert started talking. He said that given my age, we needed to discuss the estate. The brownstone in Brooklyn was worth $4 million now, and if we didn't do gift transfers soon, the estate taxes would be enormous. The property in the Hamptons needed to be dealt with too. On my birthday, before I'd even blown out the candles, right in front of me, they were talking about my assets. Elizabeth snapped at him. How could he bring this up today of all days? But Robert didn't back down. He shot back at Elizabeth, saying he knew all about how she'd been skimming from my pension for her caregiving expenses. Silence fell. I watched Elizabeth's face turn white. Pension? Skimming? Elizabeth had been managing my retirement accounts for 3 years. She said it was hard for me to go to the bank myself, so she'd handle everything. Of course I trusted her. She was my daughter. My devoted daughter. Surely not. Surely she wouldn't. The three of them argued loudly. The grandchildren started crying. Other diners began to stare. I just kept looking at the candles on my cake. Not 78 individual candles. Just 8 candles arranged around the number 78. Those candles were flickering. No, it wasn't the candles flickering. My vision was flickering. Suddenly my head was spinning. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. The next moment, I collapsed from my chair. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on a hospital bed in the emergency room. White ceiling. Fluorescent lights. The smell of disinfectant. Somewhere, machines beeped steadily. A doctor came in shortly after. A young man. He checked my pulse and delivered the diagnosis. Early-stage Alzheimer's dementia and warning signs of stroke. Dementia. That word embedded itself in my mind. After the doctor left, I could hear my 3 children gathered outside my room. They seemed to think I was unconscious. Or maybe they thought that since I had dementia, I couldn't understand anyway. I heard Jennifer's voice, Robert's wife. She was asking who would take care of me, making excuses about their apartment being too small, saying Elizabeth had always done it, so Elizabeth should continue. Elizabeth said she couldn't either. Too busy with her interior design business. At her limit already. Michael was worst of all. Way too busy with the company, absolutely impossible. Said we should just put her in a nursing home. A nursing home. Those words came from my own child's mouth. Nursing home. A place to be abandoned. A place to wait for death. I lay there with my eyes closed. A single tear rolled down my cheek, but I didn't move. In that moment, I made my decision. I would watch these creatures to the very end. I would see with my own eyes what they would do if they thought I really had dementia. So I decided to become a dementia patient. A fake one. 2 mothers' secret operation. 2 weeks after discharge, I was living in the Brooklyn brownstone with the help of a home health aide. Her name was Rosa Hernandez. A quiet woman in her early 60s. She didn't talk much, but her hands were capable. medication management, meal assistance, walking, companionship. She handled it all seamlessly. But Rosa didn't know that every night I secretly got up and went into the study. In my study, there was a safe hidden behind the bookshelf. After my husband disappeared, I was the only one who knew about it. Inside were important documents I'd collected over 40 years. That night too, I confirmed Rosa was asleep and slipped into the study. I entered the combination and opened the safe. I began examining the documents one by one. First envelope, $200,000 sent to Robert. For his business. Money I'd given from my retirement savings when his business failed. He promised to pay it back, but not a single penny ever returned. No repayment record. Second envelope, $150,000 to Elizabeth. For her business expansion. Money I'd given when she was struggling after her divorce. Again, no repayment record. Third envelope, $500,000 to Michael. Startup capital. Money I'd given when he launched his company, even co-signing his loans. He promised to repay it tenfold, but after the company grew. Michael claimed it was an investment, not a loan. $850,000 in total. Money I had saved my entire life and given to my children. But when I opened the fourth folder, I thought my heart would stop. It was a power of attorney. In my name, authorizing a second mortgage on the Brooklyn brownstone. Dated March 15, 2024. My birthday. And it bore my signature. I had never signed this document. Never authorized anything. My hands began to shake. This was forgery. Someone had taken my personal documents and created this without my knowledge. Who? At the bottom of the power of attorney, a name was written. Robert Sullivan. My eldest son. Robert. My son Robert. He had forged my signature. Put a second mortgage on my house. Without telling me. I stood there holding the documents for a long time. My hands trembled so much the papers rustled. Something hot rose in my chest. I couldn't tell if it was rage or grief. Just heat. My whole body felt like it was on fire. I thought back 40 years. When Robert was born. When I first held that tiny being in the delivery room. A baby the size of my fist who couldn't even open his eyes properly. I held him and wept. I thought he was the most beautiful baby in the world. I thought I would do anything for this child. And I did. Everything. When Robert was in elementary school and we couldn't afford tutoring. I woke at 4 a.m. to make sandwiches to sell at the farmer's market. Even when my hands cracked and bled, I didn't stop. Robert had to go to a good college. Had to succeed. That way he wouldn't struggle like us. When Robert's business failed, I readily gave him $200,000 from my retirement savings. The money my husband left. The money I needed for a comfortable old age. But I gave it anyway. He was my son. How could I ignore my own son's suffering? And yet, that son had forged my signature. Put a mortgage on my house. I didn't know where that money went yet. But one thing was clear: my son had betrayed me. At that moment, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Rosa. Reflexively, I twisted my body and pretended to collapse. I quickly hid the documents under my nightgown. Rosa rushed over. I mumbled in a foggy voice, asking where I was, why I was here. Like a dementia patient, Rosa helped me back to my room. I let her support me while staring blankly into space. That's how the dementia act began. The next morning, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking. Was it just Robert? What about Elizabeth? Michael? I needed to know how much my children had deceived me. All of it. For that, I needed help. I couldn't do it alone. I had a friend of 40 years. Dorothy Miller. A friend I'd met when we gave birth on the same day in 1983. In a small hospital in Queens. That night, we held hands and made a promise. To help each other until death. No matter what. That promise was still valid 40 years later. While Rosa was out grocery shopping, I called Dorothy. Dorothy listened to my story and was silent for a long time. Then she answered in a firm voice. She understood. She would help. Her son James was a neurologist at Mount Sinai. She'd have him create official dementia documentation. And she'd mobilize all her connections to gather evidence. Dorothy's son James was a specialist at a prestigious hospital. And Dorothy herself was a retired nurse who volunteered at a medical advocacy nonprofit. She knew far more about legal battles than I did. That's how my secret operation began. There was no code name, just exposing my children's true colors. That was all. During the day, I acted like a dementia patient. After meals, I'd ask if I'd eaten. When Elizabeth visited, I'd ask who she was. I'd pretend to leave the stove on. It was all acting. Every bit of it. Nights were different. After Rosa fell asleep, I went to the study to organize documents. I analyzed the information Dorothy sent. Robert's gambling debts. Elizabeth's bank transfer records. Michael's company financial statements. The more I learned, the more furious I became. Robert was addicted to gambling. He'd lost $2 million on illegal online gambling sites over 2 years. To pay that debt, he'd mortgaged my house. $1.5 million. He'd used my lifelong home as collateral. Elizabeth had been embezzling my pension for 3 years. About $3,000 a month. Over $130,000 had gone into Elizabeth's accounts. She claimed it was for my living expenses. But actually it all went to cover her failing business. Her company was in the red. The devoted daughter was a mask. Michael was worse. When Michael started his company, I gave him $500,000. But looking at his company's registration documents, the capital was listed as $50 million. 10 times what I gave. Where did that money come from? According to Dorothy's investigation, that money was my husband's inheritance. For 40 years, I thought my husband had run away after his business failed. That's what I was told. That's what his mother said. That her son left because of his worthless wife. But the truth was different. My husband William hadn't run away. He'd gone to China and built a hugely successful import-export business. And when he died of cancer in 2015, he left a will giving everything to me. That estate was worth $50 million. $50 million. I had no idea. The will was never delivered to me. Someone had intercepted it. That someone was Michael. Michael had been in contact with his father before he died. Behind my back. After his father passed, he'd intercepted the will. And funneled the $50 million into his own company. No taxes paid. A perfect fraud. And as soon as I was diagnosed with dementia, Michael filed for legal guardianship. He wanted to make me legally incompetent, so he could take everything that remained. My youngest son. The son I had been proudest of. The successful tech CEO. Living in an Upper East Side penthouse. $100 million in annual revenue. The foundation of that success was my husband's $50 million estate. Money that should have come to me. The reward for 40 years of struggle. Michael had stolen it. From his own mother. No. In that moment, I realized. Michael wasn't my biological son. The secret from 40 years ago. The truth Dorothy confessed. That night, in the same hospital room, we both gave birth. Dorothy had a boy. So did I. But when Dorothy's husband saw the baby, he claimed the child didn't look like him. He accused her of cheating. He was a violently jealous man. Terrified of being beaten, Dorothy secretly switched our babies, choosing the one whose face looked more like her husband's. The Michael the first raised was Dorothy's biological son. And the James that Dorothy raised. The kind young doctor who became a neurologist at Mount Sinai. Was my biological son. I had raised someone else's child for 40 years. When I learned this truth, I cried for a long time. Not from anger. From emptiness. 40 years felt like sand slipping through my fingers. But after I stopped crying, I thought again. What does blood really matter? Even though Michael didn't come from my body, I had raised him for 40 years. I nursed him, changed his diapers, held him through fevered nights. I walked him to his first day of school. Cried at his graduation, couldn't sleep the night he got his first job. If that's not being a mother, what is? Blood or not, I was Michael's mother. That hadn't changed. But Michael was different. Michael had somehow found out I wasn't his biological mother. That's why he treated me like that. Coldly. Like a stranger. No, worse than a stranger. A stranger wouldn't steal $50 million. A stranger wouldn't lock their mother in a nursing home and destroy her mind with drugs. Michael had done worse than a stranger would. And I intended to make him pay for it. Free the wolves close in. 3 months into the Dementia Act. My 3 children gathered together for the first time in a while. The official reason was to discuss mother's health. The real reason was something else. To put me in a nursing home. That day I sat blankly on the living room couch. The TV was on with the news, but I didn't watch. I just stared into space. Like a dementia patient. The 3 gathered in the living room. I pretended not to hear, but my ears were wide open. Elizabeth spoke first. She said I'd been saying strange things. Yesterday I asked her who she was. When she said she was my daughter Elizabeth. I supposedly asked since when I had a daughter. The acting was working. Robert chimed in. Said I'd left the stove on and walked away. Rosa had caught it just in time, or it could have been a disaster. That was acting too. I'd deliberately turned on the stove. And left for 10 minutes before coming back. It was calculated acting, knowing Rosa would make a fuss. Michael delivered the verdict. That it was too dangerous to leave me alone anymore. That a professional facility would be better. Professional facility. Nursing home. A place to be abandoned. Elizabeth said she'd already found a place. A nursing home in upstate New York. Called Golden Years. Great facilities, excellent medical staff, specialists in dementia. Patients like me. I laughed inside. Golden Years. What a name. Putting the word, golden, on a place where people are abandoned. Michael added more. He said he'd filed for guardianship with the court. The decision would come soon. Then he could manage my assets himself. Finally showing his true colors. Guardianship. That was the goal. To make me legally incompetent and steal my assets. especially the Hamptons property. That land was now worth $8 million since it was designated for development. Michael already knew. I sat there blankly, pretending to hear nothing, pretending to know nothing, but inside me, lava was boiling. I had raised them for 40 years. I got up at 4 a.m. to pay for their education. I worked until my hands cracked and bled. I gave my entire life to make my children successful. And this was my reward. Forged signatures, embezzled pension, stolen inheritance, and nursing home abandonment. My chest felt like it would burst. But I held back. It wasn't time yet. I needed more evidence. To completely destroy them, I needed more solid proof. So I decided to go to the nursing home. Willingly, I pretended to resist. I shouted that I wouldn't go. That I'd rather die in my own home. But when Michael produced the guardianship papers, I hung my head, pretending to surrender. A week later, I was admitted to Golden Years nursing home. And I saw hell. For hell in the nursing home. Upstate New York, a nursing home nestled on a hillside. From outside, it looked fine. Clean exterior, well-maintained gardens, modern facilities. But that was just the shell. The moment I stepped inside, I knew what kind of place this was. The corridors reeked of disinfectant. Beneath it, another smell lingered. Urine. The smell of humans being neglected. An aide led me to my room. A 4-bed ward. A cramped room with 4 beds crammed in. There was only one window, and it had bars. Like a prison. The 3 other people in the room were all lying down. No one moved. Some had their eyes open, but those eyes held no light. Drug-glazed eyes. Eyes with the soul drained out. That night, I felt real fear for the first time. I could become like them in this place. I could become a puppet, drugged senseless with no thoughts at all. Acting might become reality. I might actually develop dementia. The next morning, a nurse brought medication. 3 pills in a small paper cup. I asked what they were and was told they were vitamins. But I knew what those pills really were. Sedatives and sleeping pills. Drugs to keep patients quiet. Drugs to make us blank and compliant all day. I took the pills obediently. And when the nurse turned away, I hid them in my palm and tucked them under my pillow. I survived that way for several days. Pretending to take the pills but not swallowing them. Acting dazed while keeping my mind sharp. But on the 3rd day, they changed tactics. The nurse pried my mouth open and put the pills directly on my tongue. Then she gave me water and watched me swallow. She even stuck a finger down my throat to make sure I couldn't spit them out. From that day, my consciousness began to blur. Day and night became indistinguishable. I couldn't tell how time was passing. Sometimes when I opened my eyes, I saw the ceiling. White ceiling. Fluorescent lights. That was all. Someone seemed to be feeding me. Spoonfuls of something mushy went in and out of my mouth. I couldn't tell if it had any taste. Someone seemed to be changing my diaper. My body was handled without my will. Like an object, not a human being. How much time passed? A week? A month? I couldn't tell. My consciousness was truly fading. For real. I started to forget who I was. What was my name again? Margaret. Margaret Sullivan? Was that my name? What were my children's names? Robert? Elizabeth? Michael? Who were they again? I was scared. Was I becoming really demented? Was the person called me really disappearing? One day, through my hazy consciousness, I saw someone's face. It was Dorothy. "I'm here, Dorothy." The words wouldn't come. Only my lips moved. Dorothy held my hand. A warm hand. A living hand. Dorothy's eyes were filled with tears. An expression mixing worry and fury. I felt her resolve to get me out of there no matter what. And then darkness came again. 5. The Silver Justice League. Dorothy kept her promise. After I entered the nursing home and contact was cut off, Dorothy grew worried. No matter how bad the dementia, no phone calls and no visitors seemed wrong. Dorothy disguised herself as a nursing home volunteer and infiltrated golden years. And she saw what that place really was. Elderly people locked 4 or 5 to a room. Most lay drugged and blank. Diapers changed only once a day. Patients with bed sores left untreated. Meals were just a bowl of gruel. A few scraps of crackers as a side. Elder abuse. Clear as day. Dorothy found other people there in situations like mine. Betrayed and abandoned by their children. But still sharp-minded. Patricia Anderson, 75 years old, former high school English teacher. Her son needed money for his business. So he'd taken out a loan against her house and couldn't pay it back. She lost her home. Her husband had already passed, and with nowhere to go. She ended up in the nursing home. But her mind was perfectly clear. At document analysis and writing, she was better than most young people. 40 years of teaching English would do that. William Thompson, 80 years old, former federal prosecutor. His grandson had borrowed $500,000 for a business and committed fraud. The shock caused him to collapse, and after recovery, he ended up in the nursing home. His children sided with the grandson and abandoned their father. But Bill had eyes sharpened by 40 years of prosecution. In evidence gathering and analysis, no one could match him. Grace Chen, 72 years old, former executive secretary at a Fortune 500 company. After her husband died of cancer, she moved in with her son and daughter-in-law. But the abuse began. They didn't feed her, locked her in a room, even hit her. She couldn't take it anymore and fled to the nursing home. Grace had spent 30 years supporting a CEO. In connections and information, no one could surpass her. Harold Jenkins, 82 years old, former head of cyber crimes at the FBI. After his wife died of cancer, depression set in. He checked himself into the nursing home, only to discover it was hell. But he couldn't leave. His children didn't even visit. Harry was an expert in IT and investigation. He'd mastered smartphones in his 70s, and taught himself computer forensics in his 80s. Dorothy gathered them and made a proposal. Rescuing me was important, but this was their chance. To make all the terrible children pay. Patricia agreed. She said they were old, not stupid. Everyone should use their expertise. Bill added his support. He said if they had evidence, he could deliver it directly to his former colleagues at the FBI. Grace joined too. She said her connections could get inside information from Michael's company. Harry opened his laptop. He said he could hack the nursing home's computer system and get the accounting records. There had to be fraud. That's how the Silver Justice League was formed. Average age 76. Combined experience over 200 years. A group of experts. Comrades who shared the wound of being betrayed by their children. We were old, but not powerless. We were abandoned, but not dead. It was time to fight back.